Good morning, good morning. It is September the 30th, 2021. My name is Wayne Campbell and I welcome you to today's Pay360 Talks panel session on PCI DSS and security. PCI DSS and securing your payment infrastructure is one of the most important things you can do as a business. And it's a very common myth that selecting a payment solution will automatically make you PCI DSS certified or compliant. It very much is a partnership made between the payment service provider and the merchant themselves. A responsibility matrix should be drawn up as part of the provision to ensure that both parties are fully informed and assured of each other's responsibilities, whereby PCI DSS is concerned and compliant. So let's focus on the future. The last major release of PCI DSS was in 2015 with version 3, and then a number of iterations over the next couple of years till 2018, taking us up to version 3.2.1. That is now due for a replacement and will be version 4 of PCI DSS. And when you look at a new version and the time that's lapsed between the initial release of version 3 in 2015 and now, some of the controls that were applicable within that release are now almost over 10 years old, looking at technology from that timeline. So what do we expect with the release of PCI DSS version 4? The security goals for version 4 remain the same throughout. The main emphasis of PCI DSS is to meet the security needs of industry to ensure that card data is secured in any payment environment. Version 4 will, though, offer flexibility and support for additional methodologies to achieve security. And what does that mean? We'll focus on that during the session and possibly in the Q&A. It is also promoting security as a continuous process, rather than that single point in time each year, accrediting and making sure that you're compliant, putting controls in place to ensure that maintenance is monitored and maintained throughout that 12-month period. And also version 4 will look to improve and give more flexibility for the validation methods and procedures. So we're looking at the ROCs, the report on compliance for larger merchants, and also the self-assessment questionnaires. More on that later in the conversation. So we're looking at a more flexible and customizable framework, replacing things like compensating controls, which can be difficult and burdensome, with more of a customized implementation. There are going to be more stringent security requirements around PCI DSS version 4, including things like multi-factor authentication applied at a different level than it is in version 3.2.1. There will be more guidance given on encryption if you do have data that is either stored, processed, or transmitted within your environment. So let's hold at that point and look to start the Pay360 Talks session to listen to our panel of experts in today's event. So first of all, please let me introduce from the PCI DSS Security Standards Council, Jeremy King, the Regional Head for Europe, Simon Turner, the BT, PCI and QSA Manager, John Greenwood, Director of Compliance 3 and the Head of Technology at the Contact Center panel. And asking questions today of the panel, please welcome Anne Clark, leading business change and program delivery for Sheffield City Council, a large and complex organisation. Before we hand over though to the team today, let's start with a quick poll. Are you aware of the timeline of dates for introducing PCI DSS version 4. So please take the time to put an honest answer in that poll, whether you are aware of version 4 or not. It's something that's very, very important to your organization, understanding the timelines as to when the changes to PCI DSS will be required. Projects should really, really be starting. It's interesting to know whether people actually know when PCI DSS version 4 will be both, available for use, and also when it will be mandated, including some of the extended requirements, which we'll get an update on in a moment, within the system. So I can now see the outcome from that, and it is interesting. We've got 20% that have answered yes, they understand and know when the dates. Interestingly, 71% no, and probably even more interesting, 9% have basically said it is not my job, which is very, very, very interesting. So as I say, my name is Wayne Campbell. I really appreciate the time you've given today. So let me introduce, first of all, Jeremy King, the regional head for Europe of the PCI Security Standards Council, who's kindly offered some time today to update us all on the very latest, and also some interesting information on training for PCI DSS version 4. Welcome, Jeremy.
Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Jeremy King. I'm the regional head for Europe for the PCI Security Standards Council. Wayne, it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. And what I'm going to try and do in the next 25 minutes is to try and provide you an update from the council, and also hopefully answer the question from the poll. So let's go straight on. Next slide, please. Excellent. See, it even works. Good. So lots has been happening over the last couple of years from the council. As Wayne said in his introduction there, it has been time to renew and update the data security standard. So over the years of being involved with the PCI SSC, it's one of the things we've done on a regular basis. And we realized that during the time we've been around and involved in payments, the payment space has changed significantly. But not only that, how we manage data and how we use data has changed significantly. And really that has led us to do a sort of fundamental review and change and update of the PCI DSS, so that we will still be able to meet the needs of organizations from the smallest organization to the very largest. And this has meant quite a lot of work around understanding what this means, how our security requirements have had to change and everything. And throughout this whole process, we've been running requests for comments with our community to allow them to comment on some of the changes and proposals that we've been putting forward. We've done 2 main RFCs on the actual standard itself, and we've just completed a 3rd one on all of the supporting validation documents. And as you can see, this last one generated over 1,200 comments. So we have a good input from our community that give us a lot of feedback, and a lot of it is very technical, and it is all really valuable. So at the moment, we're going through all of this information, all of this feedback, and making some adjustments and making some changes. And this will come through. We'll explain to everyone as we go through over the coming weeks and months exactly what this has meant to how we're going about introducing DSS4, what we'll be using for organizations to be able to report on that. And it is all actually happening now. As I speak, we've been running through internal meetings to try and understand what the feedback means and how it can improve everything we're doing. So go on to the next slide, please. So here we are. Here's the first answer to the poll question, the development timeline. So we're now in the just about to start the Q4 of 2021. So you can see we've been going through a lot of development work. It started way back in 2019, and we're getting close to the point at which we're going to actually finish with this, and we're going to be ready to start issuing it. So our target is to release the document publicly in Q1 2022. That is our aim. We've been getting closer towards that. We've been pretty confident that we're going to stick to it, and it will come out and will be available for everyone to be able to download Q1 probably towards the end of Q1, if I'm honest, 2022. Now, before that official release, you'll see a little box that says actually we're going to do a soft release. And that soft release is to our stakeholders and to our community who are participating organizations, just as to allow them to see this early draft. It will just be the standard itself, and it really is a little bit of a sneak peek. But for everyone else, we'll be doing the formal release in the end of Q1. Now, another important aspect is a lot of the supporting documents, because of all of the feedback we've got and all of the training for both the QSAs and the ISAs, that will not be ready and released until the middle of the year. So although when we release the standards, you can start picking them up and running with them, a QSA is not going to be trained, and your ISAs are not going to be trained, and the supporting documents are not going to be available at that point. So really, when we discussed a lot internally about the staging of the release of these documents, and we felt that people wanted to see the document, wanted to see the DSS and start reading it and start understanding it, to understand what it would mean to your organization before you actually wanted to start implementing it. So that is why we've gone for the release of the standard ahead of the supporting documents. Now, what does this mean in terms of implementing this? So let's go on to the next slide, please. So we have a transition timeline, obviously. Again, here we are, Q4 2021. The official release is coming through, as I said, end of Q1 2022. But if you look to the right, PCI DSS 321 will not be retired until Q1 2024. We've always had this process of whenever we've updated DSS, we've always given everybody time to understand what this means and time to put into place the necessary measures to enable you to continue to have your compliance and validation. So really, we're giving everybody the thick end of 18 months to 2 years being able to prepare for DSS 4 coming into operation. But not only that, any new requirement that we introduce in DSS 4 has a further period before it becomes mandated. We've always done this as well. We've always put a future date on new requirements. So those new requirements that you'll see will not be effective until Q1 2025. So really, you have got a lot of time. Yes, it's a big change. Yes, there are a lot of new requirements coming through. And yes, we've updated a lot of other requirements. But there you've got the timeline to give you time to adjust. It also means it gives our assessors time for them to familiarize themselves with what our expectations are when they come in to assess you. So by the time that we get through towards the back end of 2023, you will have had a year to get used to it. Our assessors will have had a year to get used to it, to get trained up on it. And so as we go into 2024, then everyone's going to be ready. And obviously these times can still slip. There could be a slight delay. We're pretty close now, and I'm pretty confident they're not going to. But there we go. That is the transition timeline that we are working to within the council. Next slide, please. So what happens next? Well, as I say, we've been going through and considering every piece of feedback that we've received throughout our RFCs. We've got a lot of work to do to actually finalize the standard Obviously, it's got to go through a full review, a full check to make sure it's all laid out correctly, a spelling check, goes through our tech writers. The other thing that we're doing as well is we've always provided copies of the DSS in different languages. So another key challenge for us is to try and get translated versions of the documents available. We're looking probably the end of Q1, probably end of Q2 for some of them. So depending if you need it in another language, then we currently support 8 different languages within the council. And again, we'll be wanting to get those ready. And as soon as all this is done, then we'll be releasing it against that timeline that you've seen. And no worries, we will be letting everybody know as we get nearer to those dates that everything is ready to proceed. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a hot off the press. It's something we've never done before. It was discussed within the council. It was discussed within our community that we're actually making a DSS version 4 available to all participating organisations and all assessors as soon as it is completed. We felt that this was something we wanted to do to give a benefit for being involved with the council. We felt we wanted to get it out to the assessors as soon as we possibly could, because they have got a lot of reading to do. It is their responsibilities to be able to understand exactly what we mean by all of the changes, how they will go about assessing this. So getting this out is something new, and we hope it's well received. But if you are a PO, then look for it coming through right at the start of the new year, probably mid to end January, it will become available. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we have seen throughout the pandemic is that we've all had to change how we work. We've all had to, a lot of us have moved towards working from home, excuse me. That has meant some changes around how we consider things. And that has also raised some questions about what does it mean then if I'm working from home? Have I now got to be have the QSA come to my home as part of a validation of our organization? And essentially, really, the answers to that are no. So here are some questions then that we've had around some of the issues and problems that people have been raising. So these are questions we've heard from stakeholders. So one question we've had is whether the work from home environment is considered a sensitive area as under PCI DSS requirement 9. And the answer is no. An individual's private work from home environment is not considered a sensitive area. So personnel working from home are not required to meet the PCI requirements that apply to sensitive areas. Remember, just that sensitive area aspect. You are still going to be required to be taking care of cardholder information and customer data, but it's not the specific sensitive areas that you're needed to do, which means you've not got to have video access control over your bedroom or your lounge or your kitchen, wherever you're set up. And you've not got to put access control onto those doors so you can keep the family out. I'm sorry, I know you'd like to, but pets and children are allowed in. And yes, I've got used to seeing those on Zoom meetings. Another question that came up is whether an ISA or QSA is required to visit. As I've said, are they required to visit? No, they're not required to visit your home environment. We need to know that you've got staff working from home. We need to know how that cardholder data is being moved around and what you're gaining access to when you're working from home. But again, we're not expecting 100 million people to come into your house to do an assessment. And then, are there any specific approach an entity has to make? It depends. It depends on your business. It depends on how your data is configured, how your systems are configured, and what people are doing when they are working from home. So it is a sensible approach. We've tried to be pragmatic about some of these requirements, and these are really guidance for both organizations and the assessors, just so your staff aren't panicking if they are working from them. They're suddenly going to have to make all these specific changes and make their home into a fortress. No, we're not expecting that, but we are expecting you to take care of that customer data. Next slide, please. So another big change that's been coming through over the last couple of years is how we work with security and software. And this is a huge change. Again, we've seen when we first established PCI back in 2006, software, especially around payment applications and payment software, was something that was written and then maybe updated on an annual basis and was generally going to be used for 3 or 4 years. In today's modern world, payment software can be used and written for a specific event. It can be used for such a short period that it means to have to put it through a 6-week approval process for something that's going to be used for a weekend is just not practical. And so the council has worked on establishing a new software security framework to enable us to have a much better flexible control over modern software. And we are going to introduce, or we've introduced this with 2 main processes and procedures in mind within the framework itself. Next slide, please. One of these, and this is very new for the council, is our secure software lifecycle. And essentially what this is aimed at is really we're taking the developers themselves and approving their processes. We are looking into how do they develop software? What is their quality control procedures? Are they doing things right from the start? Are they considering security from the start? Are they checking this before any software is released? And the software SLC allows us to validate that process. It allows us to assess these software developers and make sure they are doing things right, so that when they do a software update, instead of having to go through all of this process, they can inform us that they've made a change against their approved and validated process, and we'll accept that. As the council will then be able to update that software, we'll improve and update the listing on our website. For you as the merchant, it means you're always going to be using approved software. No checking, has that gone through its update validation? Is it still compliant? Yes, it will be. So this is a big shift for us. It's a really positive shift. It's going to help enormously meet the ever-changing needs of organizations. Again, when I talk to the developers, many of them are doing daily updates. Many of them are even doing updates, several updates a day. So you can see how this is going to help them and you tremendously. Next slide. In terms of the software itself, the software security standard has been focused around modular basis. So within this, we have our core security requirements that we expect all of our software to meet, all of your software to meet, in terms of how is it going to protect cardholder data. We've then currently got 2 modules available. One is focused on account data protection, and really, again, how are you protecting that cardholder data wherever this software is used? And then we're starting to develop specific modules for specific purposes. So we've now got a terminal module. So any software that's going to be used in a payment terminal, that can be validated against the software security standard and then can be used knowing that it's going to protect that payment data. Going through time, we're going to expand the number of modules available. We'll certainly be looking at where we need to introduce them, probably shopping cart, probably other areas as well, maybe even, well, I expect us to be also other software that runs on a payment environment. Again, something we've never done before. Expect these to come through over the next couple of years as we expand our development for these new modules. And again, if there is other areas we need to bring them in, we'll introduce a new module. But this is really bringing our software validation process into the 2020s, and it's really now meeting the needs of organizations and meeting the needs of the software developers. Next slide, please. What this means for our old-fashioned good old PA DSS, well, at the end of June this year, we closed the doors for any new submissions. So we finished off, and any new PA DSS had to be submitted by the end of June. We're going through validating those now. What we're going to be doing is at the end of October, we'll be closing the door to our PA DSS program. The PA DSS program will end at the end of October next year. So what does that mean? Well, if you're currently using a PA DSS approved software, don't worry, don't panic, nothing to worry about. It is secure. It will continue to be secure. It's a good approach. Don't stop using it just because the program's finished. You will still be able to have deltas undertaken on that software. The developers can still put data through the process. It's just new submissions we've closed for. So if they do an update, implement that update. It still remains important to keep your patches and updates on all of your software. But what it does mean is if you're going to be looking to the future on where you're taking your software and you're thinking you're going to be rolling something new out, you need to be talking to your developers and software people now to make sure that they're coming into and are using the new software security framework to enable you to make sure your software is going to provide the best level of protection for your customers' data as you go forward. After October 2022, if you want to continue to use PCI DSS in your current rollout, you will need to talk to the brands. It's a compliance issue. But that is beyond the council. What we're saying is we need people to move towards a software security framework because that is the future. Next slide, please. Other changes that we've seen, point-to-point encryption has been a huge challenge for us during the pandemic when everything was closed and locked down. Ensuring the security of high security areas of cryptographic solutions and cryptographic processes has been an interesting challenge, but also we've been going through and updating that program. Next slide, please. As you can see, we also closed off at the end of June. End of June was a busy time for us. Version 2 of point-to-point encryption for new submissions, and we've now moved over to our version 3. So any new submission coming into the council will be against version 3. If you're using a version 2 solution, you're perfectly fine to keep using it. It is still secure. It offers a good and it offers a fantastic level of protection for your cardholder data. So it's still really good. It's just, as we do with all of our processing programs, we're always updating them and moving forward. So again, from a point-to-point encryption standard, your vendors should, for new solutions, should be using version 3. Next slide, please. The other thing you'll notice around, if you look on our website around point-to-point encryption listings, is sometimes you may see a little warning triangle. And one of the challenges that was created through the pandemic, we weren't able to update or renew some of the listings. Some of those we update every year, some of those we renew on a 3-year basis. And so rather than just say this is no longer valid, we put the little warning triangle there to say, hey, you know, this has got a validation, or this has got a part of the process in there that's not been updated. Go into the detail and see, talk to the vendor to see what happens. As we're coming out of lockdown and the assessors are able to start traveling again, we'll start picking these up and going through and doing all the revalidations. So again, we'll sort this out. But the actual warning triangle is a really easy way for you to check with your solution if it's still fully compliant, or if sometimes the vendor will have had a range of terminals approved against it initially. Maybe one of those terminals has now got to the end of its life cycle, and but it's still listed there. So the little warning triangle will be there to say, hey, you know, don't use this one, use all these other options that you've got against this solution. So it's just a way of giving you more information around your listings to show that you can ensure, as I always keep saying, the security of your cardholder data. Next slide, please. Another big change, a huge change in the whole way we do payments is around mobile. Mobile is everywhere. And certainly this is something we've worked on for a couple of years to try and increase the ability for merchants to be able to accept payments, especially when they're not in a fixed location. So if you think about an event, if you think about some of the big pop festivals or the markets or fairs or anything like that, then, you know, we as people and as card holders, we don't like carrying cash. We want to be able to use our contactless cards and our chip and pin cards. So the council has been working for some time now on various different options. We give them wonderful names. We call them SPOC, which is software-based pin on commercial off-the-shelf devices, or basically enabling you to use your card on a mobile device to pay for goods. contactless. A CPOC is contactless payments on COTS, so that's again just tap and go. And we are now bringing this all together into a single standard. We developed these initially as separate standards, but now we felt that this was just confusing the marketplace. And so we're gradually going to be bringing this all into our new secure mobile payments standard that will allow for all types of acceptance by merchants using a mobile device or tablet for card-based payments. Keep your eyes open. This is going to be a very interesting and exciting change over the coming years. A lot of organizations across Europe are very interested in this to try and simplify, to try and ease the acceptance of card-based payment. So watch this space. Next slide, please. I was going to say, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I've got a slow build on this one. So it really is providing the solutions for software, for hardware. And at the core of this is payment security. We absolutely are not reducing the security around the PIN. We are not reducing the security around the card. They are front and center in everything we do. We are just expanding this with the support and help of the entire community to be able to improve and make more payment options available. Next slide, please. And there's still more to come. Our world never stops. There's plenty of things happening. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we've had to adapt very much so in the COVID situation has been our training. And a lot of our training we used to do face-to-face. We had to move that all online, and we've been running that online, and we are continuing to do so. Next slide, please. So our courses are now available online. Our internal security assessor course, our PCI professional courses, all of those are available online. If they're of interest, do sign up, do visit our website. Next slide, please. Now, this is a new course that we developed this year because so many people were working from home and because we were getting so many questions around how do you do it? How do you set yourselves up? What are the security risks? What have I got to be aware of? We actually developed a 45-minute online cartoon-based or animating-based training course that goes through all of those questions that you have, all of those situations that you may have for you or your staff working from home, and we've made this available at a knockdown price of $35. It is just a training course. It is good basic information about the things you need to be aware of in any situation for any data that you're managing. So if you are working from home, if you have got staff working from home, I'm sorry I don't often do big sales plugs, but this is one. This is really helpful. Next slide, please. Apart from that, we're also rolling out our badging. We've put some credential badging. You're seeing a lot of people now on LinkedIn referencing these badges to show that, hey, you know what, I'm an internal security assessor. Easy for you to say, or a PCIP. People are proud of these, and so you should be. You know, if you've gone through the training process, then well done. You know, to take your security seriously, to show other people you are trained is great, and I look forward to seeing more of those on LinkedIn and other environments. Next slide, please. The other thing we've got this year is our global community forum. Again, sadly, we are not able to organize this in person. We've had to move it online. And unlike usual, we've condensed our 3 events into one. So we've got one global community forum that's going to be running from the 26th to the 28th of October. And each day will be set for a different time zone. So Europe will be set for day 1, 26th of October. It will run from about 8:30 in the morning till about 5 or 6 o'clock at night. It will be packed full of information. If you are a participating organization, you get 10 free tickets this year. So you've got lots of opportunity to join us. If you're an IC, you get a free ticket. So I do hope to see you all there. It is a really good opportunity to interact with the council, to interact with brands, to interact with vendors. And it'll also give more updates on all sorts of things happening within the council, and also input from external speakers. Next slide, please. behind all of this is our website. Our website is not just the standards. We've been pumping out so much information in our newsroom, supporting documents, blogs, posts, lots of information about how to work from home securely, how to work in the pandemic securely, all the different impacts. So do go and visit our website, get into the newsroom, look at the blog posts, do some search. It is packed full. There's more information than ever in there, and it really is worth your while to go and have a little browse around to see what there is. And if you can't find the information you're looking for, reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to provide that information. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been a bit of a fast run through because there's been so much happening, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have during the rest of the session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Jeremy, thank you so much for taking your time. That was really, really informative. Some really interesting comments specifically around home working, the environments based on the solution and best approaches. And also, I mean, it's great to hear you saying that, you know, the Standards Council are moving into the 2020s, looking at some of the standards as they were, and, you know, the applicability of the standards to some of that newer technology made people basically just scratch their heads. Yep. So we're going to move on to another poll now. This is based on the comments that Jeremy's just made, and as a whole, training and ISA training. I mean, I specifically have taken advantage of this myself. The ISA training has enabled me to have informed conversations with QSAs and security specialists to ensure that I both give our merchants the best advice possible based on the fact that I now have that knowledge going through the ISA certification and PCIP, and it's been of real benefit assisting Pay360 merchants and trying to assist and advise when they're going through the process of filling in their own self-questionnaires. Obviously, I'm hands-off, as I'm not allowed to touch them. You can't police your own solutions, but certainly advising them in the right way has been of benefit. So please answer that and see whether it is worth it for your organization to engage with professional industry training to ensure that both your organization and your staff are best prepared for your own certification requirements for PCI. It will be interesting to see the outcome of that. So around about we're still collecting responses. I can see popping up and down. No, that's great. So 21% of you will be interested in engaging with ISA training, and I absolutely can promote that. It is a great online course, either assisted and or web-based, but certainly really informative. 51% of you are engaging with the professionals, QSAs, to ensure that your compliance requirements are met. One thing I would say on that is, if you do have an ISA, the ability for a representative from your organization to be able to relay information to a QSA, if you are engaging them, will speed up the process, and that's important, shortening that time it takes to report your compliance. And 28% of you are continuing with internal resources, internal specialists, audit team, members of the security team, and that's absolutely fine, making sure that they are absolutely as well informed as to the standards as they can be. Certainly self-education works very, very well as well. So on that, what I'm going to do now is introduce speaker number 2. When I met Simon some time back and I saw his credentials, I felt very much like when I joined the Cubs and Scouts. I walked in with my nice clean green jumper, and then there was this chap sat on the other side of the room, and he had badges everywhere. He'd obviously been there for a while, but one thing he did was helped me, based on his experience, get my badges. And this type of experience is something within industry, you should absolutely take advantage of listening to people that have, you know, been there, seen it, and done it. So on that, I'm going to hand over to Simon to introduce himself and go through some really interesting information based on his own experience.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for the introduction. People comment about qualifications on there. Apparently my wife says I'm making up for not doing as well at school, but yeah, I'm an examaholic apparently. So great, thanks for that. And it's interesting to see from Jeremy and your training, your slides as well. I've learned some new stuff today, and certainly in regards to training, ISAs are certainly helpful when it comes to assessments. So let me introduce myself. So my name's Simon Turner. I've been a QSA for many years. I come from a technical background and have been at BT now for 6 years. And BT is definitely a different place now than it was previously when I first joined. So I look after a team of QSAs. We're also a participating organisation. Obviously, we have ISAs and we have many PCIPs within our organisations as well. So I fully support the training, because the training within our environment makes my job certainly significantly easier when you're talking about certain terminologies and environments and people understand what you're talking about. Okay. My email's address is on there, so feel free to reach out to me if you need to. I'm more than happy. Okay, so we get the trade networking. Okay. So I'm going to focus on merchant channels, and the reason I call out the merchants is because BT, we're quite unique. We are a service provider. We're also have many merchant channels. I think we've got about 65 channels at the assessments at the moment within our merchant environment. So it is rather large and it spreads over. And I'll go into a bit more detail about this as well during the course of today. We're also a communications provider. So when you had the QSA say, oh, you know, the telecoms are out of scope because it's part of the BT network, then I've got the benefit of seeing all that behind the scenes as well, which is quite useful. Okay, so I'm going to try and hopefully keep you a shortened version, because I could talk forever. So what I thought about doing is try and tell you a story about kind of where BT are and what we've done over the number of years. Okay, so we're going to talk about channels. You know, as a merchant, we've got telephone-based channels. So we have 34 contact centers with about 22,000 agents. We have third-party contact centers supporting us as well. And obviously, because of COVID, we went to working from home. Okay, I'm not going to go into any detail around that, but hopefully when we get to the detail around how we outsource, because we are going to focus on outsourcing to cloud providers as well, which is part of today's speech. We've obviously got the e-commerce and the mobile telephone scenarios. So I'm trying to explain the icons here. So kind of, you know, like Jeremy covered, a lot of people using mobile phones nowadays, and it seems a lot more people now like to use the chat sessions rather than using IVRs, because, you know, you feel like you're talking more to a person than you are to a robot, as you were on the IVR stuff. And then again, computers, e-commerce, so we're all used to using our laptops and computers for e-commerce and chat, and that's kind of what the little icons are within the computer screen there. You've got email, you've got e-commerce, and you've got chat. That's what those icons are supposed to represent. And then face-to-face channel, because the BT brand, of course, is the EE channels. So whilst BT closed their retail outlets down, previously we do have many, I think it's 560 stores that we look after, and we've got to maintain compliance for as well. So we've got the face-to-face. So I think pretty much we cover everything at BT, which is quite interesting and challenging. Okay. So we've got the merchant channels, which we've kind of covered again. I've just realized I might have duplicated the resource. I guess the bit I want to focus on is, you know, on the retail side, if we look down the bottom right-hand corner, one of the things we've seen due to COVID is the use and shutdown of our retail stores. So we've taken the opportunity with the retail stores and the retail staff to actually open up what we call micro contact centers. So this is where previously you might have got a phone call from an EE representative to say, hey, John, your contract's ending. We've got a great new offer, new iPhones coming out. Why don't you come to store? And you know, we'll have a chat and see what we can tell you. Well, because of COVID, we couldn't do that. So we had agents actually making outbound calls, but rather than inviting you to store, actually offering you the ability to take a payment over the phone. So that's a big change to the business, and we're seeing a lot more use of those channels as well. We've got 5 new categories within those retail environments trying to make use of taking payments. And as you can imagine, around scope and maintaining a merchant scope, you know, we're trying to keep close eye on that, So we do have presets for technology and reuse, which I will come on to. Okay. I guess one thing I wanted to explain as well, like a lot of your councils, we're quite a complex organization. So we've got BT Group, we've got Consumer, which is the BT, EE, and PlusNet, so we're selling to consumers. Enterprise, where we're selling to small to medium enterprises, and then we've got Global, where we're selling to big organizations. And then underpinning all that as well, we've got a CU, so a central unit, where we call technology, okay? Because we do have a central technology stack which supports all of the different environments. And you'll see why when we come to onto the next slide, why that's important. So let's talk about stakeholder engagement. Everybody talks about stakeholder engagement. It's key. We all know that. I'm not going to bore people to death on that. But what I wanted to highlight is, as you would expect in your council environments, it's quite a hard job, okay? So for each CFU, we've got to involve with different layers and different levels within the organization. So I'm going to pick consumer, okay? So rather than focus on all of them, let's just pick one, okay? So we've got the chief executive, we've got the chief financial officer, we have our CTIOs, or our chief technology information officers. So they're really one of the ones that we govern and I work key with day in and day out to make sure we keep our merchant channels compliant. We've also then got the managing directors for each product channel. So within consumer, you can imagine we've got home broadband, we've got pay as you go, we've got pay monthly, we've got BT Sport, we've got a whole raft of different channels. So therefore, we've got lots of managing directors, and then we've got technology as well. So trying to ensure compliance for the organization is certainly keeping me in a full-time job. And that's why, we're a team of 5 QSAs, we've got 2 ISAs, and we've got about 40 or 50 PCIPs within the organization. And the idea being is we can get the message out there and obviously help people understand what's going on. And effectively, we can get coordination. Okay. We've also got the BT group, we've got obviously the various committees, etc., and obviously supporting them is the chief exec, the executive committee, and the board. So as you can imagine, so this scenario we're going to talk about on the next slide really is a 4-year journey for me. So 4 years ago, we started working with the business, with the whole organization, say, right, we need to try and reduce our scope. So one of the mantras that our chief executive pushed out was that we need to reduce our scope, so stop people from hearing, seeing, or needing to deal with any payment data whatsoever, therefore reducing the risk and the burden to the organization. And I guess that's key there is, you don't have to descope. PCI doesn't require you to descope, but if you can remove the technology, you can reduce the burden. And one of those things is looking at outsourcing and cloud providers. So keep in mind, this has been a 4-year journey for me, and getting all of these people engaged, and it only happened with the mandate to remove that data, and everybody was key in the whole journey. And I'll give you a bit more details on each channels and the challenges even that we kind of observed. So thinking about our merchant channels, one thing, let's focus on contact centers. Contact centers, so we had reduced the scope already internally within BT. We have our own payment gateway, so BT Buynet, which we sell globally, which you can purchase yourself, and I'm not selling this, I'm just giving the example of how we've done it. But we decided, obviously, with the removing payment data, to look at DTF masking. Now, there's been this misconception that pause and resume removes the need for PCI compliance in contact centers. That's not true. Pause and resume, all it does is removes the need for encryption. You've still got the telephony, processing and transmitting, especially with new kind of the move to VoIP and digital. You've also got within contact centers digital channels, so chat, pay by link, etc., supporting that. So within our contact centers, we've built using a partner, kind of hybrid. So we're talking on-prem and cloud-based DTMF marketing solution, because we engage with one of the larger DTMF providers. And what we've done there is created a central capability. And what we've also done is reused technology we've already got. So if you imagine, we've got on average, I think there's about 20 different CRMs that we use throughout the business. They all use the payment gateways for obviously processing payments, doing it the traditional way, where we would tell the agent our numbers over the phone and they would repeat it back. So what we've done is we've reused that capability to actually integrate the DTM masking. So I don't know if you're aware, but in order to enable the secure channel with a masking provider, you generally type in a PIN into your handset or on a screen in an iframe. And what we've done is we've actually reused the iframe mechanism for the integration to our payment gateway and replaced it with the DTMF masking capability. So the agent still has the little box on the screen, but instead of actually seeing the numbers, we wait for the consumer to type it on there. Now, outsourcing to the third parties hasn't meant that we've removed all of our PCI requirements, okay? So the merchant always has the requirement for PCI even when you use cloud-based providers. So my 2 points we'll start off with is keep in mind that, you know, it will reduce your requirements for PCI, but it won't remove your requirement for PCI. Okay. I'm going to move on to outsourcing for electronic payments as well. So again, you can outsource the storage and processing and transmission of cardholder data away from your e-commerce websites. Obviously, that's where SAQA comes in for iframe. You've got SAQ AEP, and obviously you've got SAQD for, you know, your API-based payments. So one thing we've done is we've removed the scope. Sorry, we've reduced the scope down to as few requirements as possible, mainly around the SAQA by using the integration of our BuyNet product. And again, that's not really been a change. We've just nailed down any of our other channels where we have payment gateways to reduce the scope to our SAQA requirements. And again, outsourcing doesn't fully remove because you still got to manage that third party at the end of the day. Retail. So retail's a good case point. So again, removing the payment data away from our retail personnel. Again, we have multiple CRMs within the retail space. It almost seems like there's a different application or CRM for different payment mechanisms. So pay as you go, pay monthly. We now sell BT broadband in there. You can buy EE broadband. There's a whole raft of things we can buy in the retail environment now. So BT took to deploy a point-to-point encrypted solution within our retail, thereby the agents never have the ability or the need to touch your credit card or even process the payments. And one of the decisions we took internally as well is that if our point-to-point solution failed or we lost the ability to process online, then we'll just invite you back to come and pay into the store, or we'll give you a call later on. So we don't take any manual payments. And again, we've outsourced that to a third party, so a P2P certified solution provider, which leaves us with the requirements around physical security, you know, keeping an eye on those PEDs and making sure that they're reviewed and checked for tampering, etc. So there is still scope for us to manage. So I guess we reused our CRMs and our integrations where we used to do the payment gateway, and we've removed the payment gateway from those CRMs to do the point-to-point. And I just want to, you know, kind of highlight the reuse focus. I know within councils, you know, there's a lot of reuse capability and ability. I guess it's just making sure that you've got the education and awareness from those. And I think that's where the PCIP training comes in with those technologists as well. When you're working with colleagues trying to look to reduce the scope, you know, if you're struggling, then I would really recommend that training. And this brings me on to residual scope. So I am a QSA, and these are going to be my recommendations. Some QSAs have different opinions, but this is what I do and I advise within BT internally. So the main point there is outsourcing does not remove the merchant from scope of PCI. You're always responsible for the overall compliance status of those solutions. Harking back to the DTMF masking, okay, so DTMF masking, you may have the ability to reduce scope to an SAQA or a ROC-A, whatever it might be, but it doesn't fully remove you from compliance. So it's really important for those masking solutions, you do get the AOCs and the underlying telephony as well. For any cloud-based providers, you should be seeking AOCs. So requirement zero, what is that? So that's my terminology I use. Requirement zero really is, you know, a detailed description of how you process cardholder data, where you process cardholder data, so that when you come to any assurance function by an external QSA or in the event of a data breach, you're able to present that you do know where you process card data, by which channels, and where you're outsourcing to. So that's a key element, because without that requirement zero, you can't do that, okay? The next block really are kind of requirement 12 areas around security policies, because without that policy, you can't encourage people, and I won't use force, you have to encourage people. No one likes being told what to do, but if we can demonstrate the high level policy engagement from the exec committee, then that really does help. Your risk assessments, everybody should be doing risk assessments, especially around payment data, not necessarily financial risk assessments or business risk assessments. I guess the one thing I would say is make sure within the business risk profile you do have PCI related risks. Policies to define InfoSec capabilities and responsibilities. That's kind of requirement 12.4 and 5. Then I guess the key element really is around 12.8, so managing your third parties. So we have a big program within BT. We have 78 third parties that help us with our PCI compliance. So we have a full program which goes above and beyond what PCI requires as a bare minimum. And it really is, as a standard, it's a minimum, it's a starting point. So we do things like, we have a list of our third parties. We ensure that we have written agreements with those, and we have PCI clauses. We actually have a third-party contract around PCI where there's a whole raft of requirements around ASV scans, annual compliance for external validated QSA assessment. So even if you do meet the criteria for an SAQA self-signed, we still mandate QSA signed ROCs for our environments. Process engagement, we have a whole team of people. We have five assurers within the PCI team, and that's all they do day in and day out is engage with those third parties. And that comes into 12.8.4, and then finally a responsibility matrix. So I can assure you that with every single third party that I've worked with, we've been through a detailed responsibility matrix and ensured that they meet the requirements from a QSA point of view, not only a merchant area. And then really, finally, the incident response, making sure that in the event of a data breach, you do have a mechanism for engaging with those third parties, and it is mandated how quickly they should come back to us. And that's really to allow BT to respond to, the ICO for PCI and also our GDPR requirements. And then finally, corporate PCI governance assurance. So we have a quarterly governance review with all of our CFUs, so group, enterprise, consumer, and that's managed by us as a PCI team. So we are a team of 11, and we just about manage with kind of that resource. Okay, so moving on to key takeaways. So what is it? So, before I put this together, really thinking about what is it I want you to take away from this message, because that was a lot of information. I can talk quickly sometimes. So I guess number one, the merchant's always responsible for compliance. We should never forget that. 2, commitment from stakeholders and flexibility, especially within the QSA community and the PCI environment. Listen to the business, listen to what they have, work with them. So rather than being the blocker, ask them the requirements, then come up with a solution to enable them and look to reuse what it is. So again, outsourcing cloud providers will drive cost efficiencies, but it doesn't remove your PCI compliance requirements. And the move from traditional on-premise to digital, so that's really around the contact center arena. I see a lot of people saying, well, I've got a cloud-based telephony provider, there is no compliance. That is incorrect. They are responsible for the transmission. They do have firewalls, what they call SBCs, that control the data and the redirects to the DTMF masking solution. So make sure you engage with the QSA and your ISAs and your PCPs all understand the technology that are being assessed. And then finally, really, is what we've got within BT. We've got a very strong compliance program, and we run that on a quarterly basis. We've got a whole team that manage it, and I guess the mantra from BT is trust but verify. So we provide the ability to let the CFUs manage their own PCI. We trust them, but we verify it with our compliance program. And that was it, really. I've included my email address on the beginning of that slide deck. So if there's any questions come out of this and we don't discuss it, feel free to reach out. That's fine by me. So thanks, Wayne. Thanks for giving the opportunity.
That is really helpful and really informative, Simon, and I really appreciate the time. We are, just for all of the attendees, running a little bit behind agenda, but what I will do is try and whiz things along. We've just got a quick poll now, an interactive poll. And it's very much based on the information we've just received from Simon around stakeholder engagement. Do you believe PCI DSS compliance will be addressed during, and given Simon's comment that he started this process 4 years ago, and some of you will very probably be very jealous based on Simon's resource of 11 members of his team being able to focus solely on compliance. How is it for you guys? So specifically getting people upstairs on board. I have numerous conversations with Pay360 merchants where they fully understand the compliance requirements and really need, they understand and know what they need to do to secure that environment to a level where they can attestate their compliance. But sometimes it's very difficult in getting that message upstairs, you know, that key elevator pitch when you've got the boss there having that conversation with them around about the liability and risk that you possibly see within your organization, and you need to get their eyes. So some real interesting numbers coming through. So 50% 2022, so next year, 28% 2023, a longer term strategy, 6% even longer, and worryingly 16% even later than that. So some real conversations very probably need to be had internally with organizations, and certainly, as Simon's just alluded to there, reach out and have a word with a very, very large, complex organization that has been through this.
Thanks.
So, thank you, Simon, once again. So back to our presenters. I'd love to introduce, and I will introduce, a industry colleague who has assisted Pay360 in a number of ways and has been very closely linked to the PCI Security Standards Council, based on involvement in the special interest groups that the security standards run around guidelines on telephony and telephone payments. So I'd like to introduce John Greenwood. What I'll do, John, is hand over to you and let you run through your slides. And please be a bit quicker than Simon, if you could, because we are running late. Appreciate that.
We'll catch up. And I think, thank you very much for that, Wayne, and welcome. Great to see you, everyone. I think what we'll try and do is make it easy for folks, for that other 50% that don't think they're going to tackle PCI DSS next year. So what I want to do is share with you the approach we've been taking, currently supporting 11 councils at the moment to help them to get their PCI compliance certification. And I think this first slide just recognizes that we're in a changing landscape. You know, we've got regulation changing. And I think the first call out I'm going to make is say that PCI DSS, right? It's not just a card issue. This is a data protection issue. First and foremost, this is a data protection issue. This is around securing personal data. Card data is personal data. It just happens to be the most attractive to criminals, right? Because they can monetize it easier. So to plan over the next few years to have spoken cardholder data present in your organization, I'm not sure that's a defendable position. I'm pretty sure that is not data security by design and default. That is a data protection issue. That is the law, right? So let's see it in that context. So get a bit of urgency around this data security thing, let's say. So we've got regulatory drivers. We've got changes in payments regulation, PSD2, strong customer authentication. That's going to have an impact on acceptance rates. That's going to put pressure on our contact centers. And we've got open banking happening, an open banking regulation, which is going to give our consumers, our citizens, more ways to pay using banking apps. But that has its downside too, right? And we've also got our open access obligations. I was reading last week the Ofcom's report, and this is the Ofcom Online Nation Report 2020, reading that bit of paper, right? And it's saying that here that 13% of UK citizens aren't connected to the internet. 13%, not 23%, 13%, right? And we can share some details of that. So we're always going to have to deal with exceptions on payments, and voice and the telephone are always going to be part of that, support those exceptions. But there are market forces happening that we're all aware of, consumers, and Simon mentioned the migration to the cloud. Let's go for the next slide, Wayne. Super. So here's the problem. And I've just shared a couple of comments from colleagues I've been working with in different councils. I think this is typical. You know, great to see so many sticking their hand up and saying get some training, because it's fantastic courses, really does help with your understanding. But PCI DSS is pretty simple, really. It's all about protecting card data and making it less attractive for criminals, less easy for criminals to steal it, right? And remember, crime is pretty much state-based these days, and as the internet becomes secure, you know, so fraud is going to move, so criminal activity is going to move to more sensitive areas. But I'm sure this typifies the situation many of you are facing, right? PCI DSS just falls into the too hard category, pain in the neck category. Let's look at the next slide, please, Wayne. So here's a typical situation. The as-is scenario, Simon was making very clear. You know, typical, yes, we use network segmentation, pause, resume, or stop, start, misunderstood, or maybe even missold over the decades, years. But it only takes your call recorder and the call recording storage out of scope, still leaves all of your systems that spoken card data is transmitted through in scope of the PCI DSS, which is troublesome, right? So the strategy that we advise organizations to take, right, is actually reduce your data footprint. Good, solid advice that the ICO push forward in all cases, reduce the data footprint. But we want to move to a situation really where we're taking on board, we're grasping the nettle of digital transformation, but we've got to be able to align to the way people are paying. You know, in the UK, we use wallets predominantly, more than 50%, you know, World Pay are telling us in their global reports. And of course, our wallets have got cards in, right? But it's also the other Apple Pay, Google Pay, etc. Right? Cards, still big, credit cards, debit cards, and the promise that the card folk give, of course, is they'll always deal with the fraud. Banks aren't always so quick for your customers. Of course, we've got banking apps, but we want to get to a position, right, where we're keeping data secure, we're certified, we're compliant, and we're achieving the right balance between that customer experience, risk, and of course the cost of deployment, cost to serve. Let's have a quick look at the next slide, Wayne. Okay, let's look at this balance, right? Where we want to be, you know, is doing a great job for the customer, right? Making it easy. And I'm looking at the left-hand side, the positives. This is what we're aiming for, right? Increased payments completions. Payments completions are going to be a thing we need to look at as strong customer authentication becomes regulated from 14th of March next year. We look across Europe and we're seeing card failure rates in e-commerce due to strong customer authentication up as high as 14, 15, 20%, right? You just think of your contact center resources if you're getting 20% card failures. And of course, it's about making sure those don't happen by working with your payment partner to make sure all that's in line, right? But we've got to look at the capability to improve data security within that. And we've got other positives on the right-hand side now, reducing call handling time, right? Reducing cost to serve, reducing the PCI overhead, you know, the burden, reducing transaction processing costs, reducing the whole data compliance burden, the ICO thing, and an ICO risk, right? So there are positives either way by taking the right approach. So what are we finding out in the field? Let's move to the next slide and look at that, Wayne. So what we're finding in the field, right, is some negatives. Folks have got problems, right? And yes, on the positive side, good awareness of PCI, right? We all know we've got to do it, right? And it's a contractual obligation with the acquiring banks, right? And I know it's something, data security is something that Pay360 have been pushing. You've probably had the emails. But what I'm finding is that everybody's willing to change. Yes, let's get it done, right? And high levels of commitment, high levels of awareness. We want to get it done. There's some energy there. But how do we do it? Well, what I'm finding is, right, that nobody really is certain of what the long-term fix is, right? We're all in silos. Some people think it's an IT problem. Other people think it's a customer service problem. Other people think, is it really a data problem? Right? Nobody's really grasping the nettle and taking ownership, right? And leaving IT to solve the problem isn't clever. I've not seen any over doing this for the last 8 years, right? 40 projects overall in that time, right? I've not seen any successful project that IT have led. This is a team effort, right? And the biggest challenge is the supply chain. Simon mentioned it, you know, and a program to support them, yeah? I've seen organizations who are outsourced, payment organizations supporting councils, many councils, right? And they advertise on their website, we are level 1 PCI compliant. Ask them. There's no evidence of it. They say they're registered with Visa, no evidence of it. People are blagging it. People are genuinely blagging it, misleading you, right? Let's take another big river cloud provider. Ask them to take responsibility. Ask them what they're doing to meet your obligations, help you meet your obligations under requirement 12.8.2, as Simon mentioned, right? And their own obligation to meet requirement 12.8.9. They won't do it. They won't take responsibility for the security of cardholder data in their environment. They're going to share it with you. So there's detail there that we've really got to get in. And what's the best approach? Hey, let's attest to compliance. Let's divide and conquer. Let's break it down into each payment acceptance channel. Don't look at it as one thing. Let's break it down into e-com. Let's break it down into face-to-face, and let's break it down into Moto. And then let's make sure we do it simply. Exclude cardholder data. Let's go for a non-cardholder data environment. We've still got PCI obligations, but they're far less. What it means is SAQA for e-com, web redirection. It means SAQA for Moto, no transmitted cardholder data, right? Except dealing with the exceptions. And for our face-to-face, let's go point-to-point encryption, no cardholder data transmitted over the network. Really reduce the burden, yeah? And that's the approach that we're advocating. Let's have a look at the next slide, Wayne. Okay, so here we've got it laid out. You know, that's the compliance strategy, right? Dead straightforward, easy peasy, right in line with your data protection obligation, data security by design and default. Have a look at the ICO website. It's all over it, right? But let's have a look at the steps. Let's get all stakeholders on the same page. Let's just get everybody a real understanding of this is the approach. Let's look at the data flows. This is Simon's requirement 0, right? Let's get it mapped out, right? Each data flow in each payment acceptance channel. And let's see where the card data is and see what the opportunity is to exclude it. Then a QSA approach will look at a gap analysis against the standard. Lots of time, lots of effort. I'm sure it's great, super reports. But if the plan, the strategy is no cardholder data, then let's do that right off the bat and look at the gap analysis against where the card data is and look at our opportunity to exclude it, right? Then let's look at SAQA. Let's look at what it's asking us to do and map some tasks around it. Record the evidence, right? Let's look at what's in our policies and let's fill those policy gaps, right? Which is step 4. Fill the policy gaps where you're missing maybe a policy about managing the third-party service providers. Super content on the PCI Council website about managing third parties. Fantastic content we can copy and paste. Jeremy, I'd love us to get into all of that stuff and really use all the content that the community has provided through working groups so that we can get the processes, get the workflows, get everybody on board. Big team effort. So what does the compliance certification look like? Well, there are 3 SAQs. We can submit them very easily. All the tech there to do it. It isn't a pain in the neck anymore, right? And in all this process, we can transfer the knowledge, help people share, right? And we can make PCI compliance a business as usual activity. And that means supporting people, making it easy for folk. Let's have a look at the next slide, Wayne. Okay, so what are the big takeouts, right? It's a team game, folk. It's a team game. It's not just leaving it to IT, or it's not just leaving it to whoever, to Treasury, who's managing the relationship, the acquirer. This is a collective. This is about data security. This means getting your DPO involved and supporting, getting the message in the annual education that we have to go through as part of the Data Protection Act, right? Let's take a step 2, channel by channel, divide and conquer. Let's make it easy, right? Let's get easiest typically, right? Web redirection in our e-commerce. Sure, we've got some third-party providers, but we ask them for their attestation. We read the attestation. We read the responsibilities matrix. We look at our SAQA. We know the things we're responsible for. There's no cardholder data. We want them to be responsible for the rest, not shirking it, not falsely advertising their position, falsely stating their position. We test them. We ask the question. Be strong, right? And let's go for this no cardholder data approach. Let's align cardholder data strategy with our general data protection strategy. And that's it from me, folks. That's it. Over to you, Wayne.
John, thank you. Absolutely fantastic update. I really, really appreciate that. And there are a couple of slides that I added at the end of your session, which are here, and I'll share them with anybody that would like to speak to John further. Certainly, he's an independent compliance consultant that has provided services for Pay360 customers, and we've got oodles of feedback from those clients that have benefited from John's experience. And I think that's what this is about, utilizing and taking advantage of people's experience rather than the alternative, which is basically throwing a member of staff in at the deep end. And there is a lot of information there online for them to learn, but the signposting for that information isn't the greatest. And I'm not knocking the PCI website in any way whatsoever, but it is a big beast. There's a lot of information there. And when you start looking at things like self-assessment questionnaires and the attestation of compliance and which versions, and version 4's coming, SAQs will start to disappear and be replaced with merchant attestation forms, or MEF, or something similar to that. Yeah, things are complex. Version 4, although there is quite a timeline till it's mandated, is going to be a larger beast, based on the fact that the inclusion a lot of the guidelines, supporting documents, are now going to be included within those standards. So on that, let's have a quick interactive poll. And as I say, we are running a little bit behind, and I do apologize for that. And the question is, are you aware of the services and support Pay360 offers organizations to meet their data and payment security requirements? So the likes of the services that we can assist and point you towards an independent compliance officer, such as John's organization, or assistance through ISA qualified Pay360 service providers such as myself. I'm not waving my flag, but I am here to talk and help if you need that assistance. So certainly, if you are aware, that is great. It means that we've been doing our job well. If you're not aware, we need to get that information to you. Please reach out, because these conversations and these online webinars obviously only have so much time, and we're limited in the sort of interaction that we can have. That interaction on a one-to-one basis, however, is available there all the time. So let's look at the poll results. Yes, you were aware, 70%. That's great. That means we've got the information to you. No, 30%. Please reach out and ask the question and see what sort of benefits you can gain from the experience of people that have been through this over and over again. Don't start from the beginning, most definitely. So at this point, we're going to start talking and having a conversation. What I'd like to do, though, is introduce an industry colleague and someone that I've worked with a number of times out on site meetings. Oh, shamefully, we haven't been there for a long time. But Anne Clark, who is the Senior Business Change and Programme Delivery for Sheffield City Council. Good afternoon? It is. Good afternoon, Anne. Thank you very much for joining. If you could just say hello to the panel.
Hello.
Hello, Anne.
Talk to you all. Yeah.
It is great. Thank you very much. What I'd like you to do, as I'm going to moderate this, is lead by asking some probing questions of our panel and myself with regards compliance and PCI DSS as a whole, things that are affecting you and your organization when it comes to your overall compliance strategy.
Okay, right. Yes, I'm just listening to what John was talking about. Certainly our approach over the last 2 or 3 years is to get no card environment data on our environments. But one of the challenges is to keep it like that. And certainly through lockdown and various things like that, other things have occurred. So some of my questions are targeted at the things that have occurred to make sure we keep that environment. So my first question is, we use partners and third-party providers for our customers to make payments by secure telephone channels, right? These partners and third parties store and process and transmit details of telephone calls in their data center, and they have been recorded from dial tones. Should they not provide us with a PCI attestation certificate?
I think what I'd like to do, if I could, everybody, and John, you could take a deep breath for a moment, and Jeremy, please stand back. Simon, with your telecoms background, could you dive into that question and try and answer Anne's question?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is I'm going to say yes, right? Because obviously it depends on the technology that's being used and what the agreement. So there's a whole raft of stuff. So there's contractual language. It depends what you've asked from the third-party supplier. I do a lot of bid work within global and enterprise, and I see lots of bids coming in with or without PCI questions. Okay, so the majority of them are saying I want PCI, but they don't understand what PCI is. Okay, so the clarity really needs to be defined. You know, what is it you're expecting from your telephony provider? Because pause and resume just removes the storage for cardholder data. So they're still transmitting cardholder data, they're still processing cardholder data. So technically, yes, they should have an AOC. However, traditionally, we don't get that. Okay, you only see providers, cloud providers, slowly coming on with the recognition of AOCs because the technology that's processing that data impacts the security. So there's this big misconception about storage. It's not about storage, it's about the impacting of cardholder data as well. So yes, you should do. You probably won't get many of them that give it to you. It is being recognized gradually. There's more education and awareness that comes out of that. But certainly from my point of view, where BT are engaging with third-party contact centers supporting us, I certainly ask them for service provider AOCs relating to the services, the telephony, the people, the desktops, etc. So yes is the answer.
Okay, thank you. And certainly we have put our requirements into contracts in more detail, so they're standard in our sourcing desk and things like that. So yeah, right. Okay.
The only thing
thank you, Simon. And I'm sorry, John, carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say the only thing I'd get copies. Don't take their word for it because there's misunderstanding at their end. Have a look at the attestation.
No, we get copies off everybody. Yeah.
Not the silly certificates either. That you get from security. I won't mention people, sorry, yes.
I'd like to signpost as well some PCI DSS documentation that John assisted in working on when you are trying to understand the scope of a card data environment, specifically when it comes to telecoms. The Special Interest Group created a document in 2018, I believe, specific to telephony environments, and there are a number of, and I like them, pictures within there that outline the card data flows and different variations, including the call recording and so on and so forth, and understanding which elements of that are in scope and which ones aren't. And when you understand from Simon's perspective, service providers, when it comes to telecoms, and some people say, oh, telecoms are out of scope. If it's unified telecoms and it's more than just the point-to-point telephone solution that they're providing. So they're providing that PBX or switch and or some other customer service based infrastructure that's in scope of your environment, and fully understanding that certainly opens your eyes to the risk and liability that is placed on your organization when you are not assuring that your service providers are fully PCI compliant as well. So back to you, Anne. Sorry, great question.
Okay. Yeah, right. COVID-19 has led the council to change some of its responsibilities. For example, we're called upon to collect shopping people, citizens that we're shielding. Customers having to pay for these items collected has been a challenge for us, right? Do you have any advice how to balance compliance risk with new types of activities, especially where relatively limited circumstances?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. It is really good. I was involved in a special interest group a year or so back for large and complex organizations, and a discussion, an element of that was around the social and legal responsibility that a local authority has to provide set services to individuals when it comes to accessibility issues or social responsibility, so on and so forth, and understanding the requirement from at a legal level that a local authority has to provide these services given the constraints of compliance, and the constraints are there for a reason. Given that, there is also a line, and Jeremy will probably be much more knowledgeable than me on this, there is a line somewhere within the standards that says nowhere within the standards does this override any other local regulation or law to your environment. So although the standards still apply, a local authority has certain responsibilities and legal requirements as a defense to say, for example, if you had to take a card number in what you would see as a non-compliant way to provide that service, then as long as it was all fully documented and you put in place controls to secure that environment to your very, very best possible effect, you are defending yourself. I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Jeremy, at all, or expand.
Yeah, no, I will. I think the big question is in these situations, how are you expecting to receive the payment? Is that going to be in person by the council employee when he drops the shopping off, or whatever service it is that they expect the person they're doing this for to pay them then, or are you expecting that person to phone you up? And there are things you can do. It's really about what Wayne said. It's trying to make sure that you are protecting their cardholder data as much as you can. So if that means they've got to write it down on a piece of paper, okay, it's not preferable, but understand then you've got cardholder information. So how do you control that piece of paper? How do you ensure that you know it's only on that one piece of paper? How do you ensure that it gets entered into a system and then destroyed? That's a process you can do that minimizes the risk. If you have your council staff, there are mobile payment acceptance, and I talked about this, but we've had some around. So if you think of the Square, if you think of the iZettle devices, little payment card acceptance devices that we test and make sure they're darn secure, that will run off a mobile phone, that means the person can tap and go. There, that's just exactly a great example. Thank you that you're holding up there, Wayne. So you can do a payment solution that's actually very cost effective for being able for your operators to take an instant payment on site. If you're going to do anything else, just have a process so you manage it. Know exactly how many people they're doing. So if you're going to have 5 bits of paper, 5 bits of paper are accounted in, logged, and then taken to your payment place. You enter them, you do the payment, you shred them. It's you're doing the best you can in those situations.
Yeah. Well, following on from that, which is accessibility is important for our citizens, and they've got various needs, both physical and mental. And so there's poses a challenge for card payment processors and the ability for us to take these payments against ensuring and maintaining compliance. Is there any way forward with some of this, future situations?
I think I'll try and field this one if I can, everybody. And this is selfishly based on the solutions as a payment service provider that Pay360 can provide. So understanding the limitations of some citizens and users in processing payments using technology that you've introduced to secure your environment, what we've done to try and assist with situations where that technical solution may not be applicable is adding and utilizing services that allow you to tokenize that card data for future use. So using card on file type facilities. So if you take a payment in the first instance by way of as securely as you can, so that may be by asking the user to either get a member of the family to initiate that initial transaction so we can store that card data against their account, or worst case scenario, you type that card number in the first instance, and then secure that environment using controls within that environment. It will mean that payments from that point forward will be secure based on the fact that you're not having to ask for that full PAN or that full card number again. You would just ask them to possibly confirm the last 4 digits of the card number, and you're doing your due diligence to ensure that they are the card holder. Things like that, in addition to payment plans and scheduled payments against account, I think will start reducing that problem.
Just follows on with another question I've got, really, because do we have to confirm and get the customer to agree to give us that card data? Because I noticed personally from like the Amazons and the insurance companies, they hold that card data, but they never ask the customer if they should hold
I have no comment about Amazon or the large organizations of this world that rules do not seem to apply
but
to.
should we ask the customer, is it correct that we store your data?
Under card scheme rules, which are aside from PCI DSS, absolutely. I mean, I don't know whether, John, you have any comment on that as well, but I believe that would be the case.
Well, I think the first point is that you're storing tokens. But I think, being open, being communicative, making sure that customers know exactly where they stand is the right way to go. We've got a duty of care to be transparent. And that's what the Data Protection Act is asking of us, just to be clear.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. We're moving to 3D authentication. I know it's running a bit late, but we are that multi-factor, right? And it's certainly up and down the country. This is changing. Should be requiring a PCI DSS attestation certificate for those that have gone through the change to 3D authentication.
So, I mean, Jeremy, there is an element of PCI DSS that's applied to 3D Secure as far as certification is concerned to service providers at a level above your standard gateway providers. So I don't know whether you want to address that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, great that you're improving your security. That's always great to great to see, great to hear. In terms of should you update your attestations, not really. We're doing it. You're going to do an annual validation. So essentially, each year you're going to pick this up. So your next annual validation, they'll realize and they'll see this, and then they'll incorporate that. So going forward, you'll just expand that. So no, you don't need to do anything specifically now. It'll just get taken up and move forward.
Yeah. Okay.
That's fantastic. I really.
Yeah.
Go. Sorry, Anne. Carry on.
I've not got any further questions. So if there's someone,
I really appreciate the time that you put aside today to ask those questions, and I really do thank the panel for assisting me with those as well. I mean, given the time, we were going to have an open Q&A session with the attendees, but I do want to give them the time back. Please we will ensure that all questions within the Q&A are addressed, and we'll reach out personally and individually. If any of those questions were targeted to our panel members today, we'll make sure that those are forwarded to the panel members. So based on time, I think we'll have to make the decision that the open Q&A will have to be a virtual one that will run online, and we will interact with you all individually. Really do appreciate the time that you've all taken out today. One thing just before I do wrap up, and this is one click before you leave, I do have a poll as you leave. If you could look to answer that for us, which is I've just made my poll 5 disappear. There we go. Would you like additional information on how Pay360 can help with your PCI DSS channels, and provide additional information on staff training? So let us know at this point if we could, because what we'll do is individually reach out and then go through the training and solutions that are available, that we can certainly assist with compliance. And once again, I do apologize for overrunning. It is the subject matter. We could talk about this all day long and probably still not get to the bottom of the bucket. It's that bigger subject, and it's getting bigger, which is great. So let's have a look at the results. So yes, 62% of you would like to reach out, and we will contact you. Not at this time, that's absolutely fine. And 2% later. Please pop a reminder in your calendar to reach out, those of you that have selected later. But besides that, what I'd like to do then is thank you all for attending. I'll thank all of the individual panelists. You've been absolutely great. Double thanks to Anne for attending. That's been superb with those questions. Thank you, Simon, Jeremy, and John, for your time. And on that, we will end today's Pay360 Talks PCI session.